through, or by extension, the cycle of rebirth, passing from one place to the next. And the Chinese translation of that word is quite interesting. It's not translated as passing through, but it's translated as 生死, life and death. It's important to remember that not only is life repeated one after another, but the process as a whole is regarded as unpleasant. It's not a happy process. It's marked by, again, what the early sources call dukkha, suffering. In Chinese, 苦. Even pleasurable things come to an end, and that reality that we often try to avoid, that even pleasant things come to an end, that is inevitably a painful process of realization. Hence, the process of samsara is not a pleasant one. It's what one hopes to escape from. Escape from the sufferings of samsara is denoted by a very special word in Indian Buddhism and carried through into China, Tibet, Japan, and elsewhere. And that's the word in Sanskrit, nirvana. The Chinese translation of the word nirvana is actually pretty good as far as literal translations go. The first term there is not a translation, it's a transliteration based on the sound of nirvana. And in modern Mandarin sounds something like Nieppan. In the medieval period it sounded closer to nirvana. But usually the word nirvana in Chinese is translated into the word mie, which means extinction or ending. And in fact, extinction is precisely how we ought to translate the word nirvana literally, if we're searching for a literal English translation of the Sanskrit word. When a candle is blown out, what happens to the flame? The flame has become extinct in precisely this sense. It's the usual way that scholastics explain the sense of the word nirvana in early Buddhism. So nirvana is the extinction. It's usually left unclear precisely what it is the extinction of. What is it that is extinguished? But we can surmise either samsara or suffering is that which is extinguished. And escape or extinction of suffering is something that is very, very rare. Technically, only a Buddha or a saint in early Buddhism could achieve nirvana. And so a Buddha is not a person like you and me, though he began life as a person like you and me, but a Buddha is a person who spent many, many lifetimes of preparation working to amass the credit of good deeds and the wisdom to understand how to achieve the extinction of suffering. This essentially then establishes a distinction, if we're now moving forward to think about what this means for life and death. Most of us, when we die, are going to be reborn again. That's an unassailable fact about the way the world is put together. But when a Buddha dies, he is not going to return, in theory, to the realm of suffering. He's going to achieve nirvana. So there's basically, there are two ways of dying, and virtually all of us are condemned, at least in this life, so the Buddha tells us, to repeated rebirth and repeated death, whereas a Buddha is going to pass into nirvana. This contrast is evident in some very widespread conceptions and portrayals of the passing away of the Buddha. This is a 8th century depiction of the Buddha passing into nirvana from Dunhuang in northwest China, cave 158. It's quite huge. It's 55 feet long from head to toe. The Buddha's basically, his head is at your eye level as you enter this long, very long, narrow cave temple. And on the walls above him and at the side of him are various beings who have gathered to pay their respects. So the contrast I want to draw here is between the expression on the face of the Buddha and the grandeur of his body, of his size, the peacefulness of his expression, on the one hand, contrasted with the expressions of on the faces of his four disciples. Sorry, more than four. The monks here, monks indicated by bald heads, they're monks trying to listen for his last words. They're monks who are clearly pained and grieved at his passing. And they stand in contrast to the much more detached attitudes of these saints or bodhisattvas in attendance. So, Buddhist cosmology is based on the idea of impermanence and on the idea of nirvana as a very difficult to achieve state of extinction. Another way that Buddhists talk about birth and death is to use the symbol of a wheel, and that's what I want to turn your attention to. I'm going to use this particular painting. It's from the Rubin Museum of Art in New York City. It's a 19th century Tibetan painting. I'm going to use it as an example to unpack the pieces of the Buddhist doctrine of rebirth. These are the various terms for the wheel of rebirth. I'm going to move quickly so that we can talk about the painting as a whole and look at the interesting elements of it. What is a wheel? I've had to think about wheels a lot. Professor Chiang mentioned that I've been publishing a few books recently. This particular book I worked on for 12 years, so I was not being very prolific when I was working on this material because I was thinking a lot about wheels. What is a wheel? How does it differ from a circle? Well, the circle's a geometric object. It has a focus and it has a perimeter. That's how you define it geometrically. A wheel, on the other hand, is a man-made object and it turns. And there's certain things that wheels have to have in order to function as wheels. They have to have an axle or a hub. They have to have spokes. So they have to have something in the center that's round. They have to have spokes to give some strength to the wheel. And then they have to have a rim. Right? So let's go through those elements of the Buddhist wheel of rebirth. I'm going to deal first with the biggest part of the wheel, and that's these 5 sections divided by these 5 spokes. They occupy physically the largest space in the painting. These are the 5, or as you'll see in a minute, they've snuck in a 6th realm, but they haven't put a spoke by that section to distinguish it. These 5 or 6 sections are the 5 or 6 species or modes in which beings can be reborn in the world. I'm going to start at top left and give you a little bit of a detail of what's there. This sector right here actually has two classes of beings in it. At the very top are the gods, and down below are the demigods, or asuras in Sanskrit. You'll see the weapons here of the demigods. Demigods, by nature, are very jealous and very fierce. They are very powerful, but they're still very much subject to their desires. And one of the things that they're driven by is their fierceness. Another thing is by their jealousy. One of the things they're jealous about is this tree right here. And you'll see the roots of the tree are lower down in the realm of the demigods, but the fruit falls from the tree and it falls over the fence in their neighbor's yard into the realm of the gods. And the fruit can